2020's carbon emissions target. Is the Climate Energy Emergency Measures Bill the way forward? Two people with contrasting opinions on this are with me in studio this morning. In a moment we'll hear from Dr. John Conroy, who's the project manager with Providence Resources. But first, TD for AAA People Before Profit, Brid Smith. Good morning, Brid.
Good morning.
This actually is not government legislation. This is part of the new Dáil, whereby something has been put forward by someone in opposition and has got the numbers potentially to succeed. Is that right?
Well, it's a bill that I put forward in the names of the 6 deputies of Solidarity People Before Profit that attempts to really get serious about climate change, because what we have nowadays is that the science on climate change is irrefutable. There's no more climate change deniers in terms of the actual science. But
there's many deniers, thankfully not many in this country.
Yeah, but what we do have in this country and everywhere else is the sort of attitude, well, yeah, it's going to happen, but there's nothing we can do about it. And this is an attempt to really shake the cage of those who feel comfortable in the idea that we don't have to do anything about the fact that global temperatures are set to rise above 2% within the next decade or so. And Ireland ranks 49th out of 60 globally in terms of its poor performance on climate change. We really are in a bad place. So although I don't believe that by preventing the exploration, the issuing of any more exploration licences in the Irish Sea or the Porcupine Basin or the Atlantic Ocean is actually going to stop that 2% rise, what it is attempting to do is to make a serious contribution to a global movement that is saying to states, wake up and smell the coffee. We cannot continue to extract fossil fuels from the earth. In fact, the science tells us that 80% of known fossil fuel reserves must stay in the ground if we've any chance of keeping the global temperatures from rising above 2% of post-industrial levels.
The immediate challenge is more what you and I are doing day to day to prevent carbon emissions from entering the environment. Stopping drilling for it, it's not going to do much. Is it purely an aesthetic measure and we want to send a clear message?
Well, actually, I totally disagree with that, because the drilling itself has a huge impact on sea life, on 60% of plankton. It kills 60% of plankton, which is the very foundation and basis of all other sea life.
Not everywhere, just where the drilling is going on.
Within 5 kilometres of the drilling, which is quite a distance, it can have a huge impact on dolphins, on whales. It does have an impact on the life of the fishing communities who have testified, and recent documentaries on TG Carr, etc., show that they have testified that fish stocks have depleted where drilling takes place. So that's just one aspect of it.
But I don't want to kind of overplay this, because it's not as if there's drilling going on right around the coast. It's only in certain areas because we don't know what's there. But you're hoping that this is a message, a clear message that's going to be sent out. But why are other countries not doing the same?
They are. There's 5 other countries already that have permanently banned the exploration for fossil fuels off their coast. Costa Rica, New Zealand, France, Belize, and there's one other. And Ireland could be part of a global movement that is saying to our states that we've got to stop this, because they talk about energy security, and I know the spokesperson from Providence will probably use that as his main strong point. Where do we get the energy security from if we don't have a promised reserve of gas and oil coming from our own oceans? But by the time we would get to, first of all, explore for that, and there has been lots of exploration done with no evidence of the billions that were promised, the billions of barrels that were promised, for example, from the Porcupine Basin. Last year, 3 to 4 billion barrels they only found water. By the time you do the exploration and then you do the appraisal and then you get to do the development, you're looking at 15 to 20 years from now. If by 15, 20 years from now we are not leaving it in the ground, then this planet is in serious trouble, and energy security will be nothing in compared with the security of the very existence of human life on the planet.
And many people listening to you will agree wholeheartedly that, we need to have come up with alternatives. We need to be in electric cars. But is the grim reality not that we need it now and for the foreseeable future? And that aside, the state gets a significant amount of money from people who are drilling and pay tax as a result.
Well, actually, the state contributes a significant amount of money to the fossil fuel industry in terms of subsidies, investment, development, and levies in education, etc. So there's another bill in the fossil fuel divestment bill, which Tommy Pringle put in to try and deal with that aspect of it. But, you know, I'm not arguing that we need to turn off everything now and stop all gas and all oil that we rely on to heat our homes and cook our meals. But what this is about is saying in the future we cannot be relying on this. We are told uncategorically by the scientists 80% of what we know exists must stay in the ground. So therefore let's begin now to wake up and make massive investment in alternative energy.
OK, well, let's bring in Dr. John Conroy, who's the project manager with Providence Resources, and to explain to people, John, Providence would be one of the main companies that's involved in exploration off our shores. Is that right?
Providence is an independent Irish oil and gas company, and we have acreage and licences offshore Ireland, west coast, southern coast.
But based on that, what Brid is arguing for there is that if we are going to make a significant difference to this, we shouldn't be using as much fossil fuels in 20 years' time. It is hard to argue with the logic of that.
Well, this bill, Jonathan, is bad for the environment, actually. It's very bad for energy security and really bad for our economy.
How so?
Well, natural gas plays an integral role and will play an integral role in the transition to a low-carbon economy. It makes no sense to replace indigenous supplies with gas that we import. It makes no sense at all. We would be better off using our own gas. It's a very efficient fuel. Gas produces 40% less carbon than coal and peat in terms of power generation. So it's a really clean, efficient, environmentally.
But don't the alternatives produce 0%?
Well, gas is also our backup source of energy when the wind doesn't blow. Some of the coldest days of the year, the wind doesn't blow. It's just a fact. That's when we need natural gas. And I guess the point I'd like to make here is what matters is how much carbon is produced, not where it is produced. For example, we are 100% dependent on imports of oil, and we have 50% of our gas imports come from the UK with one single point connection. The remaining part of our natural gas, which is used for electricity generation and for heating, comes from the Corrib gas field, which will ultimately over time go into decline.
As the Kinsale gas field did before, the Corrib gas field will go as well. Yeah. So I think the point that Brid is trying to make is that we need to come up with better and cleaner alternatives now, and we're not going to do that if we keep drilling for the same thing that got us into trouble in the first place. Gas or oil.
Banning future oil and gas licences is just basically giving away our energy sovereignty. We are relying on Corrib at the moment to provide 50% of our gas. The remainder is imported.
But we're up to 40% of wind generated power, admittedly on a good day, but that's 40% that wasn't there 10 years ago.
But yeah, indeed, and we would welcome greater penetration of lower carbon initiatives. The key point here is that we need fossil fuels in the medium to long term as we continue to go towards a lower carbon economy. For a point here that's worth making: 26,000 businesses in this country rely on gas for their heating and for power, for keeping for their energy needs. 654,000 homes use gas for heating and cooking.
They do.
1.4 million households use oil and gas.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
Banning it doesn't do anything for us.
But there's new technology, which means in all of our homes and indeed in businesses, if you want to heat, you can actually get a little machine that sucks in air and that heats your home. So the technology will move on if we decide that we need it to.
Yes.
So that the concern I have here is we are, by allowing further drilling, and I'm not saying I agree with the bill, but by allowing further drilling and saying it can continue in perpetuity, we're going to keep making the same mistakes and we're going to end up relying more on fuels that we shouldn't be using.
Well, this bill does nothing for the environment. I mean, this is the key point. Every time you import a molecule of gas, you increase the carbon footprint. We need to head towards a lower carbon economy. We all accept that. There are initiatives that can be put in place, but importing gas in the meantime makes no sense. You need to find your own resources and for our own energy sovereignty.
You say this is an example of gesture politics. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, it does nothing for the environment. it does nothing for jobs and the economy. The oil industry employs 250 direct jobs and over 500 indirect jobs in the country. For every exploration well we drill offshore, 15 to 20% of that cost goes directly into the local economy. When Corrib was being developed, 300 Irish companies were used. 1 billion was spent with those companies.
It wasn't the most easy of births for the Corrib gas field. We don't need to remind people.
It's also our indigenous source of gas supplies. There's a very interesting statistic, Jonathan. I think it's worth your listeners to hear this. During Storm Emma, when we had one of our coldest spells, the UK was at the limit of its discretionary gas supplies. In other words, it needed all its own gas to heat for its own businesses and homes. We are depending on them for gas in the future. When and if Corrib eventually runs out, we need our own supplies. We have one connection point there. We would be entirely dependent on them to be good to us and provide us.
Okay.
I mean, Jonathan, we spent many hundreds of years looking for our independence in this country. We're going to give it away by taking on this on board.
Well, let's talk to Brid Smith, who is the author of the bill. We're going to give away our energy sovereignty, Brid.
Well, again, I'll just repeat that it's interesting listening to John that he's not in the Trump bracket of climate change denial, but what he is denying is that the future of global warming and the possibility, the imminent possibility of the planet overheating above 2%, he is denying that is something that we need to panic and concern ourselves about. And to bury your head in the sand...
We'll come back to it, but I don't think he's quite saying that. To bury your head in the sand and to say that climate change is happening, but there's nothing we can do without it. We need our own gas, because it's still, there's an argument out there, and John will be aware of this, a scientific argument that gas as a transition fuel is not climate friendly, and that we need to move away. But it is cleaner.
It is cleaner than oil, but it is not climate friendly. But we don't actually have that proven, John, and we're not supposed to be going head to head here. But I will say this, that the point of this bill is to look ahead and to say in 15, 20 years' time, we want to be keeping it in the ground. Now we have to keep it in the ground. But why the hell would you be issuing licences to Providence to speculate? And that really is what you do. You speculate.
Well,
you find very little oil and gas, but you speculate on the licences, the dozens of licences that are issued.
Well, they have to go looking for it. I think that's an accepted point. The other thing is it does nothing for the environment, Brid. The bill that you're putting forward is, to coin the phrase, and I find it here, gesture politics.
Well, I think that that completely ignores the fact that climate change is imminent, that the planet is overheating, and that what the scientists are telling us is leave 80% of known fossil fuels in the ground. That's the fuels we know
why can't we go after the 20%? Why can't we go after the 20%?
What do you mean the 20%?
Well, if you say 80% should be left in the ground.
Of known fossil fuels.
Of known fossil fuels.
So 80% of known fossil fuels should be left in the ground. So why do you want to explore more? Okay. Because what you're doing is you are going to the heart of what is overheating the planet.
I want to bring John Conroy back. You're not a climate change denier anyway, for starters.
No, I think any rational person understands that we need to go towards a lower carbon economy. We just need to make sure we don't ruin our country in the process by introducing really extreme measures that make no difference at all. And can I just make one point? I know Brid said we're not going to head to head, and that's fair enough. The 80%,
that's your choice, though, not mine.
Well, the 80% figure. Well, hold on. The 80% figure you talk about. You were misquoting that, and all of your colleagues are misquoting it in the Dáil. It only relates to coal breach. It does not. It relates. It doesn't. Read the Nature paper.
Let's be careful in parliamentary language.
Half for gas and a third for oil is the figure. Please read the paper. The other thing that Brid mentioned was about countries. She mentioned 4 countries, 4 she named at least. There are 195 countries in the world. The UK are not banning oil. The Scotland aren't. Germany. Norway. Look at Norway.
But John,
that doesn't necessarily mean that they're right, just because they're not doing it yet.
Well, take Norway as an example. Really, we often use Norway as a reference point, Jonathan, in this country for lots of things. They are driving electrical vehicle penetration in their country. They're aiming towards a lower carbon economy. They have naturally, and then they promote actively oil and gas exploration. They have 40 years of developing some of the largest fields in the North Sea, and they continue to actively promote because they see it as a key component of the energy mix. It is. Banning it does nothing for this country. It does nothing for the environment.
This bill is trying to tell you, your company and others, that the game is up. Climate change is a serious proposition for life on this planet. It is a game changer. And I think the oil industry, the fossil fuel industry, is burying their head in the sand.
This bill,
and refusing to recognise it.
This bill does nothing.
It is a debate that will continue, and it is before the House. You're confident it will pass, I'm presuming, Brid Smith?
Well, it goes to scrutiny. It goes to scrutiny on the 3rd and on the 10th of July. And I might mention that on the 1st of July, People Before Profit, along with the Green campaigners, Leave It in the Ground, Not Here, Not Anywhere, Friends of the Earth, are having a kind of a symbolic protest at 10 o'clock on the Bullwall, and we're going to use the opportunity to raise awareness and to ask people to join us outside the Dáil on the 3rd.
No, we welcome the debate in the Dáil, and we're happy to contribute to that and make the scientific points.
Dr. John Conroy, Project Manager with Providence Resources, and Brid Smith TD for AAA People Before Profit. Thank you both very much for joining us. Lots of texts coming in on all of that. We'll get to them in just a moment.
The Pat Kenny Show on News Talk
with MasterCard. Be inspired.